Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is an unrehearsed, unedited look into my digital art workflow. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, illustrator, designer, animator, and your friend. And I'm excited as always to get into another episode this week where we'll be creating a piece of art start to finish in over the course of the next 2 hours or so. So thanks for tuning in. As always, this show is, I think, most productive and best when folks are getting in the chat, hanging out, saying hi. A lot of times we'll do a brief segment later in the show where people can share the work that they're, working on. So if you have something that you want to get some more eyes on or maybe get a little bit of feedback on, feel free to send a link and throw that in the chat, and we can pull that up a little later in the stream. I guess some quick news is that we finally broke 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is just huge and really, really awesome, which has opened up some new features for me, like the super chat and paid content. I think we're going to explore ways to, use those assets and bring more value to you guys. So anyways, thanks for help pushing us over that 1K mark. So I guess, you could probably see here, I've got this little sketch that I put together, about last week. And I've actually recorded the process of this sketch. So I'm going to, later on, I'll be sharing this on Instagram. You can watch the whole sketching process. I'm not going to be playing that now. I've got some other sort of similar sketches in the sketchbook. And definitely going to be making a scene like this today. So thanks for jumping in. Thanks for watching. And feel free to jump in the chat and say what's up. Now, sometimes we have a little bit of issues with this this chat client. So let me actually see. Give me 1 second. Oops. YouTube. Sorry, bear with me. Thank you, Spooky Ghost. Oh, okay, it is working. That's great. All right. Cool. Thanks, Spooky. Appreciate that. All right. So now we know everything's working. Let's jump in. Oops. All right. So now last week we did a little isometric scene, which I dig, but I think this time we're going to go a little bit more sort of head on. In fact, I'm going to drop a camera in like right away, zero it out. Now we know what we're dealing with here. Depending on what you're after, I think a lot of times it makes it easier to set up a camera early and make sure it's all centered and leveled out. That way when you drop stuff into the scene, it's going to drop it right in the middle. And you can use that as sort of a starting point. Make your life a little bit easier. So now let's just start massing out the shapes, right? And I want to keep this really geometric and say hi unido. Hello, thanks for joining in. No habla, sorry. Or lo siento. So like I was saying, I want to keep this really sort of geometric and kind of rounded. You can see in that sketch, there's sort of a form language that I'm looking to follow, which is typical of a lot of my work. I do quite enjoy these sort of rounded shapes, and just taking simple forms and sort of stacking and piling them together to create something a little more interesting. But I also find that if you use sort of a limited range of shapes, it leads to sort of harmony, like an overall like blending or meshing or harmony between the elements in the scene or in your piece. So I aim to do that some more today. I think the same can be said of not just the forms, the shapes in your piece, but you can use a limited color palette to establish harmony. You can use a range of similar textures or techniques. I find that if you're struggling, or if sometimes I even almost use it as a crutch, right? But limiting yourself oftentimes makes decision making throughout the course of creation of the piece a bit easier, which can be a really good thing, of course. And so we've created scenes similar to this before, but I still think there's a lot of room for exploration, a lot of room for creating interesting stuff. Um, I really like sort of coming up with an idea and riffing on that theme for a while. I'll usually wind up creating like 3 or 4 pieces of a similar theme or a similar style, and really sort of exploring it a bit. I find that helps me sort of work through ideas. Adjust the camera slightly here, gives a little more room to add buildings to, and also pushing it down I think is going to give it a bit more of a give the elements in the background here a bit more of a tall feeling, like you're sort of looking up at them. That's another thing you can really do, especially in 3D, to affect the feeling of the scene. Is adjust sort of the camera angle. And I guess you can even do that drawing. It's not going to be technically a camera angle, but you can do that with your point of view in the scene, and whether or not you're looking up and the perspective makes it feel like you're gazing upwards at a large item, or maybe you're looking down at something. Think about that from the viewer's point of view and how that might affect the feeling of a piece. Hey Jiyoung, thanks for stopping by. Sorry about that, getting some text messages. So another thing I really want to do with here is, since we're playing with similarly shaped items, we're only going to use a handful of shapes really here in this scene. But one thing I definitely want to do, since we're not going to have a lot of variety in the types of shapes we're using, I want to have a lot of variety in the sizes of those shapes, right? I think that's also going to help us create, that balance of large and small is going to help us create, not only visual interest, but I think it's going to make this feel like more of a massive city. There's large buildings and small buildings mixed in. It sort of gives the piece a sense of scale, as opposed to, potentially just having a lot of similarly sized buildings and shapes, which would make everything feel sort of the same size, and that would make it feel smaller, I think. So just mixing shapes in, as I mentioned here. I think I want, before I copy this guy, I think I want to add a little window. So let's see here. Another cylinder. And even the shape of this window is going to relate to the form language that we're using in the rest of the piece. I think it's important to establish those hierarchies. So frustrating. I hate how the cylinder caps aren't connected in Cinema automatically. Gotta throw them in a connect object or something like that. There we go. Actually, come to think of it, I'm not sure if I want that poking all the way through. Little windowsill. Good. I'm going to group these guys together. I figure the reason I had copied this and then I sort of undid that and went back is because, I might have a couple of these and I'd rather only do it once. Go. Select all the points, then optimize them. They all access one object. Got it. So that's cool. I mean, that's another way, I guess, sort of to skin that cat. But I just wish, as a default, that they were connected, because it's still a process you have to take, right? You have to go hit some buttons. Like, why? I'm trying to think of the use cases where you would want the tops of those things detached, and I just don't know why that Maxon has programmed that as your go-to, your standard way of operating, because I can rarely think of the instances where I need a disconnected cap. And 99% of the time that I'm using a cylinder, I want that cap connected. So it's just like, it's cool to know of another optimization route, another way around that, but it's still a process that you have to take. I just wish it was the default. Anyway. Next to the pointer, though. I always love hearing, like in programs like Cinema, there's always more than one way to skin a cat. There's always more than one way to get something done. So it's cool to hear the other tips and tricks that folks have. Adding some more of these arched windows in. Right, exactly. Yep, spooky, exactly. Or the same thing with the text. They recently, I think in the last couple releases of Cinema, they made a version where instead of the same thing happening with the caps on like a motext object, they added a little button that said, single object or something like that. And it treats those as a single piece, and it also increases the quality of the sort of the fall off around the faces of those objects because of the way the surfaces are connected. So it's a good thing. So yeah, like always, just sort of pushing and pulling here, making sure things look good, adding them, moving them, tweaking them. The first little while of a piece, for me at least, is always just kind of pushing and pulling, getting things lined up, really working on that composition. Well, maybe it's a good time for a test rendering. I'll throw on ambient occlusion real quick. I'm also going to get rid of this default material, which usually stinks. So. Whoops. Got a lot of control there. Shoot. Adding a bit of lighting always adds a ton to the image, of course. Not a bad start. I don't know if that window's working in there. Turn that off for the time being. Nice. Just creating a bit of a horizon line here behind these buildings and towers. Add a bit of interest and sort of ground the items in the city. I'm going to bring them down just a little bit actually, because it looks like, I was talking about the phenomenon of sort of looking up at things and having them seem a bit bigger. But having this horizon line go up makes it appear as if the buildings are a bit shorter. And then I'll probably even angle this camera a little bit too to counterbalance that. And I'm just going to increase the height on some of these, maybe give us a little bit more drama, a little bit more dynamic, making use of some of that negative space up in the sky, which I think is going to look really nice. Cool. All right, so let's start playing with texture a bit here. This base color, I think we want to drop to something a little more neutral, a little more sort of cream colored, slightly off-white. I'm adding blue to that material because that will give us a bit more what we call sort of atmospheric perspective. The lighter something is, or I'll say it this way: the further something is away, the lighter and more blue it's going to appear. So we can use that to our advantage in, helping to create the perception of distance. So each of these ground materials get cooler and lighter as they go back. Like actually this middle one could be a little bit lighter to continue that effect. And that's going to make it look like the hills are a little bit further in the distance there. I think we're probably a little bit too saturated with this foreground color. I want to go a little bit more pale with that. Cool. So now I'm working with the sun placement a little bit, rotating that sky, pushing it a little further into the day. I think, not only are the placement of these forms important for creating a nice composition, but then, of course, where the shadows fall is gonna have a big impact on how the piece looks. So now's about the time when I start giving some thought to that and making sure all that's going to look really good. Now, the shadows are looking a bit dark now, and I'm definitely, once I get the composition and some of the other elements a little bit further along, I'm going to add global illumination to the piece, which is going to make these shadows much less dark. So they're not quite right just yet, but I still plan to adjust them as the piece progresses. Hmm. Whoops. That's not what I meant to hit. So I want to add some sort of plants and shrubs and things along the base. Just going to make a new, what's going on here? Nice, okay. Just going to really quickly and roughly draw out sort of a leaf shape here. Sort of cleaning up some of these points here, making sure I have a nice, smooth, sort of organic feeling shape here. Mostly pretty good, but a little bit of touch-up helps a lot. And if your shapes aren't looking as smooth and as nice as you'd like them, a lot of times you want to look at these equal tangent lengths and equal tangent directions, because those commands will help you smooth things out. These Bezier points can be a little weird to work with at first. They take a minute to get the hang of. And I find that some of the basic tricks are like, you don't want too many of them, because the more you have, the more difficult they get to control actually. And getting the lengths and directions of some of these tangents, which are these little handles that come out from the point, getting those the same the same direction and the same length or intensity is going to allow you to get more soft, sort of organic, natural looking forms. See that guy, like I'm just going to delete that guy because it's going to be easier to get a nice smooth curve with fewer points. With this guy even, I'm going to go length equal tangent direction. I'm just going to rotate that, make it a bit bigger. That whole thing's much smoother now. Cool. That's good enough for now. Just going to do a simple extrusion on this. Boom. Wow. This must be really, really large. Do it. Boom. I'm just going to sprinkle this sort of plant shape around the base here, which I think is going to help sort of break up that bottom edge, give it a little bit more of an organic feel. And these curves of this leaf shape, I think, will help provide some nice contrast against sort of the hard edges of the sides of these buildings. See how they look. Hey, Chub Monkey. right. I'm gonna throw in some GI now as I start getting into some of the texturing here, just so I can get a closer look at really what the colors are gonna look like. So that's happening. I'm also going to do a save as. So I'm going to start expanding some of these shapes so I can start adding stripes to them and deforming them a little bit. And I think it's going to be helpful to just do a save as. So I got a clean version as a backup should I mess anything up too badly and need to go back. So I'm going to try out another different style of window on this building too, which I think might work. Maybe I should say a series of windows. I think these sort of three hole windows are going to act as a nice counterpart to the sort of arched windows we have going on elsewhere. And you can see what a big difference in lighting throwing that GI on does. You know, it's makes a huge difference. Shadows are much less dark. The bounce on the light's a little more realistic. So, digging that. I'm not sure if that's going to work given the curve on the top edge of this cube that I'm punching these out of. Hopefully it does. Might get a little bit of an odd shape there though. Let's see. No, pretty close to centered. I'm actually just going to use this center point on this object to scoot it over and get it, pretty darn close to center. That'll be close enough for this exercise. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And really, I should be much better about naming and organizing all this stuff, but since I'm hanging out with you guys, just keep it a little more loose and stream of consciousness. Check that out, same kind of thing. Wow, getting pretty darn close. Get that close to center. Using this center point as a little guide. Pull that out. Nice. Coming together, coming together. Hey, C5 Fortes. What are you doing there, buddy? I'm creating an illustration using a 3D program called Cinema 4D. Thanks for tuning in. What are you doing there, buddy? I'm not sure if this crossmember thing is going to work here. Little sort of window pane divider. A mullion, I guess you'd call it. We'll take a look. And this is where I think the piece often really starts coming together, is when we get in here and start texturing and adding some noise. It's looking way too big, by the way. Whoops. As you can see, I'm sort of going through here and selecting different groups of polygons, just sort of breaking things up a little bit. Adding some different texture and adding interest to these forms. So I added a subdivision surface to this cube here because I'm not loving some of the faceting you're seeing in the bevel here. Hopefully that'll take care of some of that. I'm also realizing now is we don't really have any little doorways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this arch shape and punch out some holes at the ground level. Needs to happen. That actually, I think, helps create some scale too, because if you look down and you see these tiny little doorways, you think about sort of the grandeur and size of the city. At least I might. That subdivision surface did really help with this section of windows here. You can see how that kind of smooths out, looks a little better there. This guy's got some weirdness going on too. So I'm going to throw him in a subdivision surface and just turn it down to only one subdivision. Might as well do the same with this guy. Let's keep it smooth and nice. Hey Jamie, thanks for the kind words. 1K, right? Pretty awesome. And Mixiner, Mikesoner, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate you stopping by. Working on like a little geometric city town kind of thing here, a little village, if you will. That doesn't look right. I think it's floating way in space here, yeah, which is okay. And you can see that this isn't like a realistically built model. What I'm doing here is just, creating an illustration from a single point of view. So I don't mind that some of the items aren't like perfectly, modeled and stitched together. But the lighting on that one was really weird because it was so far back. So I think I want to bring this guy a little bit closer in here. Hopefully that's better. Thanks, Jamie. That's really nice to hear. Appreciate it. Appreciate you stopping by. Now, is there anything, I guess Jamie and anyone else who wants to chime in, is there anything else that you'd like to see more of on this channel? Um, I've been at it for a while, and I'm really happy making the stuff that I am making, but I'm always curious to hear from the community, see what you guys find most valuable. And I've also been thinking about, you know, maybe pushing the offering a little bit further, and maybe offering, one-on-one consultation sessions, maybe offering downloadable assets from shows past, things like that. I wonder if it would look all right if some of these plants and leaves are kind of up in the city. Rooftop gardens, See how that works. Hmm. Just adding some shapes here that might kind of act as clouds. I will take a little bit of experimentation with the texturing here to get them looking that way, but wondering if in this big, simple, open sky it might make sense to break it up a little bit with some subtle forms there. Huh. Okay. Cool. Thanks for the feedback, you guys. I'll definitely keep this sort of stuff in mind. What's funny, Jamie, is I actually just applied some subsurface scattering to the clouds here. I typically use those when you want an effect that looks like light is penetrating an object to get some sort of see-throughness, some waxiness. And I've done animations in the past, Jamie, and it's been a while since I've done one on the practice, but it could be something worth picking up again in the future. It's a lot. I like to keep these shows at only about 2 hours in length, and animation, as you can imagine, is much more time intensive than just a typical one-frame illustration. So. Yeah, so you definitely explore that, and maybe it would make sense to do a multi-parter. I know I've done like a two-parter with an animation and some dynamics in the past, and that seemed to work out pretty cool. So yeah, maybe I'll explore that again in the future. The reason I don't do it all the time is because of just sort of the length of time it takes, and then you've got to wait for 40 or 80 or 100 frames to render out, however long it is. So just need to find a simple enough approach. If that makes sense. I'm just feeling a little bit too bubbly. I think maybe I just need to push the alpha back a little bit further, really make these guys kind of see-through and subtle. Just trying to build and layer these in an interesting way. We can use these clouds as a device to sort of frame out some of these bumps and city and tower shapes, and add interest to the composition. Now, one thing I've been doing lately is instead of using transparency, I've just been using a simple alpha channel. It doesn't have quite as many options in terms of refraction and light penetration and things like that. But when I'm going for just a simple kind of see-through effect here, sometimes it's really useful. It's certainly a faster technique. It takes less time to render alpha than it does high-end transparencies. So for simple applications, it's a great time saver. Although it definitely won't always give you all the features you want. But what I like, typically my style isn't super realistic. It's much more illustrative and graphic. So I feel less of a need to be, realistic. If I was trying to make a really shiny, realistic style sort of rendering, I would be much more likely to use a true refractive, reflective glass material. But in this instance, we're just kind of putting some bubbly shapes together. So I'll just kill the luminance here. See what happens if we just go alpha. Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, thanks for tuning into that 50th one. I'm really pleased with how that piece came out. And the depth, the water came out nice. The depth effect on that was fairly convincing. So appreciate it. So all the spheres are feeling a little bit too just perfectly round and bubbly for my taste. So what I'm doing is using this formula effector to add a bit of a wave to it. Break up those perfectly circular shapes. May or may not work, but worth experimenting with a little bit for sure. Now I just removed subsurface scattering to see if I could get a little bit of a flatter kind of look on these things. And the way the light was penetrating looked kind of cool, right? But you could see the light coming through to the inside of the bubble. And that, well, I say bubble, inside of the sphere, which makes it really look like a bubble, which, honestly wasn't working for the effect I wanted on these clouds. I'm looking to make like sort of really simple geometric graphic looking clouds, and they were just looking too much like bubbles kind of rolling in over the hillside. So changing it up a bit. I have worked on murals before, Jamie. In my last job, actually, before I went out and started freelancing as an illustrator and animator, I was with a event agency. One of the largest experience in event agencies in the world. I worked my way up to associate creative director, and one of the things that I'd done most in that position was murals. So not in terms of painting murals, which I have done once or twice before, but did a lot of like digital print wallpapers, just really really massive graphics for offices and different environments. So yes I have. And I think these bubbles are getting a little bit flatter, a little bit more graphic, which is how I wanted them. But look, they're kind of disappearing in the background here because they're almost the same color as the sky. So I'm just going to adjust that a little bit. Do you have any specific questions about murals, Jamie? Is there anything I can help you with, or that we can discuss, or are you just sort of curious? Yeah, see, that's feeling much better to me in terms of the overall look. They look more like clouds and less like bubbles. I like that sort of flat appearance. I wonder, should I kill the formula if we like that flat appearance? Does it make sense to not have this formula vector going? Let's see. All right, so we're almost there. I want to make sure these clouds look just right. We're going to get in on a big rendering, do some quick Photoshop retouching. I think we'll call it a stream. Yeah, and now that we've got a really flat appearance for the material on these clouds, I think treating them as actual spheres works much better. Got some layering going on. I dig it. Cool. All right, final rendering time. Boot up Photoshop 2 here while we wait. Let's compare it to the other similar piece like this we've done before. 3 episodes ago, we made this piece, which I think is cool and has a lot of similarities, but it's not quite the same. Let's compare the two. This is a fun way to riff on a theme. Whoop, quite you. Let's actually look at the retouched version, which is what we're going to go in and bump up some of those colors. So, see, there's some similarities. This one's a little bit more detailed. It uses a lot more rounded shapes. Whereas I think actually the introduction of some of these rounded squares, or cubes rather, feels pretty nice. See, these ones I didn't actually, in most of the instances, I didn't punch through the shapes. I just kind of added this little window to the front of them. And I actually kind of like what we get with the dark contrast in some of the shadows here when we actually punch into the windows. So, cool. And I actually like, this was sort of meant to be a smoky look, and it looks pretty nice, but I think we've upgraded these bubbles a little bit. I really like the way they appear sort of flat and graphic, which really pushes them into the background and contrasts nicely against the smooth, kind of rounded, shaded sections of the town in front. So let's save this bad boy and do a little retouching. There we go. Cool. Now when I work in Photoshop, I pretty much always like to work with these adjustment layers. So that way we're doing sort of non-destructive adjustments to the image. So frequently we start with curves. I like to add a little bit of blue to the shadows. Bump up some of those lights. It's too light. The other great thing about these adjustment layers is not only can you go back in and adjust them, change them on the fly if you don't like what you did, or remove them, for example, if one isn't working for you. But what's also cool is you can make really fine-tune adjustments by just adjusting the opacity. Cool. The other thing to note is that the layer that you apply these adjustment layers, or the order you apply these adjustment layers in, affects the way they work with the image too. So if I put that at the top, you'll notice like slight changes. Might be difficult to see on the stream depending on the quality of your connection right now, but you can definitely see a difference. Like if I were to move this to the top, see how that shifts a little bit. right. This is a really fun exploration. Um, I think, there's definitely room to take it further. If we weren't just on a 2-hour stream, I think I'd add a little more detail. I'd probably continue with some of these sort of mullions and details on the windows. I might add little frames. I might add little doors with knobs onto here. Um, yeah, I might actually add a few different types of plants here and sort of intersperse those and move those around. But I like the way that these kind of curly leaf shapes, break up the repetition of all the forms throughout the rest of the piece. They provide a little bit of relief. But I think one of the strong things about this piece is the uniformity of the forms. Right? There's this very rounded geometric shape throughout the piece, which I think is working. So yeah, so thanks for tuning in, you guys. It's been super fun as always. If you found this useful at all, if you liked it, share it with a pal. Hit the thumbs up button, hit subscribe, hit the bell icon for notifications, all that good stuff. If you want to keep up with me and my creative work, give me a follow on Instagram at DLGNCE. That's short for diligence. I'm also on Twitter and Tumblr and all that good stuff, but I'm definitely these days most active on Instagram. So again, thanks so much. I hope that this show is inspiring for you and is helpful in encouraging you to develop your own healthy creative practices. So until next time, I'll see you next Tuesday, 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern. Thanks for tuning in. Stuart saying goodbye. Later.